Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
There was this moment, about 6 minutes before the music started, when the world just kind of paused, like the universe wanted to give me one last shot at walking away quietly before the storm hit. I was standing just outside the hall, near one of those fake Roman pillars that people rent to make the place feel more expensive than it is, when I heard her voice through the open service door. Clear as day, almost bored, she said it like she was commenting on the weather or traffic. "I'm only doing this for the house." She laughed after it, and then her mom's voice floated in, smug and syrupy. "That's my girl," Claudia said, followed by the distinct clink of glass, probably the overpriced white wine she always brought to any event, uninvited or not. Then, as if they were in on the same punchline, her mother added, "Let's get this over with so we can move you in by next week." That was it. No big dramatic reveal, no shouting, no guilt in her voice. Just business. Just a deal. A transaction she apparently didn't think I had the right to understand. I could have walked away right then. Hell, I should have. But instead, I walked back inside. There were 132 guests, every damn folding chair accounted for. My childhood best friend, Jason, was already half drunk and waving from the third row. My mom looked proud. My sister gave me a wink. Everyone was waiting. Everyone was invested in this thing like it was a sporting event, and I was just the quarterback who'd better not choke. I walked all the way down the aisle. Amber was standing there in a white dress she picked out with my credit card, holding a bouquet she made me drive across 2 counties to get. She looked stunning, I won't lie. That's what makes it worse. Her eyes locked with mine, and for a second, I almost believed none of what I heard had been real. But I knew better. So when I got up there, the pastor gave his little welcome spiel, thanked everyone for coming, and turned to me to begin the vows. And that's when I leaned in close, kissed Amber gently on the cheek, and whispered, "I know." Just 2 words, quiet enough that only she heard them. Then I stepped back, straightened my jacket, turned to the crowd, and walked out. No yelling, no scene. Just left. You ever been in a room where no one knows what to do? Like a fire drill where nobody trained for it? That's what it felt like. First there were murmurs, then some laughter. People thought it was a joke. Then my mom stood up, her hands over her mouth, and Amber's face cracked like a dropped mirror. I didn't see what happened after that. I walked straight out the double doors, into the parking lot, into my truck, and drove. Not to my apartment. Not to a bar. Not even to Jason's place. I drove to a storage unit on the other side of town. One of those beige roll-up garages, Unit 67. I punched in the code, waited for the lock to buzz, and pulled up the door. Now, this is where it gets weird. Inside weren't old furniture or high school trophies or crap I didn't have room for. Nah. Inside were 5 large boxes, 2 folding chairs, a corkboard covered in sticky notes, a whiteboard filled with dates and quotes, and a set of manila folders labeled with things like phone records, texts, and financial agreements. In the center of the whiteboard was a picture of Amber and Claudia, sipping cocktails on a patio I paid for, with a big red circle around Claudia's face and the word "Queen Pin" written under it in dry erase marker. Yeah, I know how this sounds. Truth is, I knew something was off for a while. Claudia never liked me. She was the kind of woman who smiled with her mouth and frowned with her eyes. Always throwing little digs, telling Amber she could do better, reminding me at dinner that home ownership means more responsibility. Hope you're up for it, Jake. It got worse when Amber and I started house hunting. At first, I chalked it up to her being a control freak. But then Amber started pushing certain properties, ones listed by a realtor Claudia played tennis with. That's when the alarm started going off. So I started collecting. Quietly. Watching. Not snooping exactly, just verifying my instincts. And the more I found, the worse it got. There were emails between Claudia and a lawyer talking about prenups before I even proposed. Texts where Amber joked to a friend that Jake's good for a house and maybe a kid, but not much else. I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe it was just venting. People say dumb stuff in private, right? But it added up. And I started preparing. So when she said what she said on the wedding day, it wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. That storage unit had everything I needed to make sure they didn't win. And trust me, I wasn't walking away from the wedding out of weakness. I was walking into the next phase of the plan. Because if they wanted to play dirty, I was gonna show them just how clean revenge can feel. And by the time Claudia realized I wasn't just another idiot with a truck and a credit card, it'd already be too late. But before any of that unfolded, I needed one thing to stay true: patience. So I sat down in one of those folding chairs, stared at the corkboard, and said to myself, let's begin. You know how they say hindsight's 20/20? Yeah, well, mine didn't kick in until about 5 years too late, and by that point, the damage wasn't just done, it had been gift-wrapped, shipped, and signed for with a fake smile. I met Amber in the most cliché way possible, at a 4th of July cookout hosted by mutual friends, the kind where someone always brings store-bought potato salad and lies about making it from scratch. She was wearing a cheap American flag tank top, drinking a spiked lemonade, and laughing at some guy trying to juggle beer cans by the grill. I remember thinking, she's way too pretty to be hanging around with the rest of us degenerates, but somehow we ended up sitting next to each other in lawn chairs by the fire pit, talking about old cartoons and how her dog was terrified of fireworks. It felt easy, natural, like we were already halfway through a conversation we'd started years ago. We started dating not long after that. You ever fall into something so fast you don't even notice you're falling? That was us. Late-night diner runs where we ordered the same thing every time: patty melts and curly fries, extra ranch. She thought pineapple on pizza was a sin, and I liked her enough to pretend I agreed. We watched terrible horror movies on her couch with a blanket that smelled like cinnamon and old laundry detergent. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what it's supposed to feel like. And for a while, it was. Then came Claudia. Amber didn't talk about her mom much at first. Said they were close but complicated, which is just code for, she controls everything I do and I don't know how to stop it. I didn't meet Claudia until month 4, maybe 5. She showed up unannounced at Amber's apartment with a bottle of overpriced wine and eyes that scanned me like I was a piece of steak cooked the wrong way. She smiled, but it never reached past her nose. I offered to shake her hand and she handed me her coat instead. That kind of woman. From that day forward, she was always there, hovering in the background, whispering opinions when no one asked for them, asking Amber questions in front of me that were clearly meant to embarrass me, like how much money I made or whether I had a real retirement plan. I worked as an auto technician, made decent money, had no debt, and kept my credit score north of 700. But to Claudia, I may as well have been a guy selling bootleg DVDs out of a van. Despite her mom, Amber and I kept going strong. About a year in, she started hinting about buying a house. Said she was tired of renting and wanted to build equity. She used words like asset and portfolio, which honestly I hadn't expected from her, but I respected the ambition. We'd drive around on Sundays looking at open houses, pretending to be picky, pointing out little things like kitchen cabinets and backyard fences. It felt exciting, like the next logical step. Now here's where I made mistake number 1. She told me, pretty casually over breakfast one morning, that it made more sense to put the house in her name. Something about her qualifying for a better rate because she was a first-time buyer and had a teacher's loan advantage. She said it was just a formality, that we'd both be living there, and that paperwork didn't change love. I nodded like a dumbass. I even offered to cover the down payment and closing costs because she'd had some family medical bills and was stretched thin. That's how she put it. Stretched thin. Looking back, I can't even blame her entirely. I wanted so badly for things to be easy. I told myself this was just part of being an adult, making compromises, trusting your partner. But trust has a funny way of turning into denial when you're too afraid to ask questions. Over the next couple years, we were together for about 4.5 years, so like 52 months or something, things got routine. We argued more, mostly about small stuff. She started working late more often, said she was mentoring a new teacher. Claudia got bolder too, stopping by the house like she owned it, criticizing my landscaping or making comments about upgrades that could increase resale value. I started noticing Amber echoing her mom's words, using phrases I'd heard from Claudia first. At first, I thought it was just influence, like when couples start talking alike. But then I started wondering if she even knew she was doing it. One night, maybe a month before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. Something was off. Amber had gone to bed early after a tense dinner, and I was just sitting there on the couch staring at the ceiling. Something told me to look. Not to snoop, just to confirm I was paranoid and go back to bed. I went into the bedroom, opened her nightstand drawer, and found it. A yellow folder with a tab labeled, "Just in case." Inside was a prenuptial agreement, typed, signed by her mother as a witness, and dated almost 6 months before I proposed. My name was already filled in. There were clauses about debt separation, asset division, a stipulation that the house would remain solely hers in any event. There was even a section about intellectual property, which I don't even understand. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. My hands were sweating. I sat down on the edge of the bed, trying to piece it together. Did she write this? Did she plan this? Or was it Claudia, pulling the strings like always? I didn't say anything that night. I put the folder back exactly how I found it and laid beside her, staring at the ceiling until the sun came up. And right then, I knew something important. Love doesn't protect you from being used. It just makes it hurt more when you find out. And still, I didn't walk away. Not yet. There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't sting right away. It settles in slow, like a cold draft through a cracked window, subtle enough that you don't even feel it until you're halfway to freezing. That's what it was like after I found the prenup. At first, it didn't hit me how deep this thing really went. I wanted to believe there was a version of reality where Amber had just gotten scared, where Claudia had pressured her into something, and maybe she hadn't gone along with it. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. And once you realize the person sleeping next to you might be wearing a mask, it changes how you hear every word they've ever said. The morning after I found the prenup, I acted normal. I made coffee, asked her if she wanted toast or eggs, and gave her a kiss on the cheek before she left for work. She smiled at me like nothing was wrong, which told me everything I needed to know. If she could lie that easily, right to my face, after planning something like that behind my back, then there was nothing she wouldn't do if it benefited her. I took that day off work. Told my boss I needed a personal day, and he didn't ask questions. I sat down at my kitchen table, the one I bought and assembled by myself, by the way, and opened up my laptop. If I was going to get screwed, I at least wanted to know exactly how deep the screw was going to go. I started with the house documents. I still had the original emails from when we made the offer, and something didn't sit right about the realtor Amber insisted on using. Her name was Denise Parsons, and I remembered Amber mentioning once that her mom used to play tennis with her back in the day. That was a throwaway comment at the time. Now, it felt like a flashing red light. I searched Denise's name, found her agency, found her LinkedIn, then found her email listed on a real estate site. I dug back through Amber's inbox. Yes, I looked. Call it snooping, call it whatever you want, but I wasn't going to be the last person to know what was being done to me. I found 3 emails between Denise and Claudia, one of which was dated a full month before Amber even brought up the idea of buying a house together. One of them literally read, "If he goes along with it, great. If not, we'll pivot. Either way, the house gets done." That line made me feel like I'd swallowed a brick. It didn't stop there. I found text messages between Amber and her friend Talia, one of those girls who always had something smart to say about other people's relationships, but had never had one last longer than a haircut. In one of the texts, Amber wrote, "He's just dumb enough not to notice as long as I keep him fed and laid." There was a crying laughing emoji after it, which somehow made it worse. She was laughing about me. Not just lying to me, mocking me like I was a dog that didn't know he'd been trained. That was the day something inside me snapped, not in a dramatic way, but in a cold, quiet, calculated kind of way. The kind of snap that doesn't make you yell or throw things, but instead makes you start organizing files and reading fine print. I packed a small bag, told Amber I was visiting a cousin out of town for the weekend, and instead drove 3 towns over to see an old friend of mine, Kenny, who worked in real estate law. I hadn't talked to Kenny in almost a year, but when I called and said, "Hey, I think someone's trying to rob me legally," he said, "I've got beer in the fridge and a whiteboard in the garage. Come over." Kenny didn't sugarcoat it. After I showed him everything, the prenup, the emails, the texts, even a short voice memo I had started recording on my phone while Amber was talking to Claudia on speaker, he leaned back in his chair, cracked a beer, and said, "Jake, this ain't love. This is a goddamn paper trail to a heist." He helped me review the deed paperwork and found something interesting. While Amber's name was listed as the primary, mine was co-owner on the loan. Meaning, legally, I had skin in the game, even if the title was meant to look like hers alone. That detail became my opening. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented every transaction. I started requesting digital copies of everything we had signed. I paid out of pocket to get a neutral third-party evaluation on the house. And most importantly, I began moving money. Not in huge amounts, just $100 here, 50 there, but slowly, I pulled back all the extra cash I'd funneled into joint accounts. Amber didn't notice because I left enough to keep everything looking normal. She kept planning the wedding, kept laughing with her mom on the phone about floral arrangements and seating charts, and I kept pretending I was too busy to help. What she didn't know was that during those last few weeks before the wedding, I had made several visits to the county office, spoken with a real estate trustee, and initiated the paperwork to move my ownership interest into a family trust, one that didn't have Amber's name on it. By the time the wedding invitations went out, I had taken myself off the insurance policy tied to the house, removed her as a beneficiary on my 401k, and quietly updated my will. Every paper trail that had once pointed to us now pointed only to me or to someone I trusted. And then, the night before the wedding, while Amber was at her bachelorette party at some winery her mom had rented out, I changed the locks. Not in a vengeful way, not like I was kicking her out. Just a quiet reset. A silent statement. She didn't even notice the next morning because she came straight to the venue from the hotel. She probably thought the keys in her purse still opened the front door. Spoiler alert, they didn't. So while she was slipping into her dress and smiling for the camera, I was preparing for something else entirely, not a wedding, but a reveal. One she would never see coming. And by the time she realized what had happened, I would already be gone. People think revenge is loud, that it's some kind of dramatic outburst, glass smashing against walls, screaming matches in parking lots, red faces, and clenched fists, but I've learned that the real kind of revenge, the kind that lingers, is quiet. It's subtle. It looks like you walking calmly out of your own wedding while everyone else is too stunned to stand. It looks like a smirk when you know something they don't, and it sounds like absolute silence when they finally realize just how badly they miscalculated. The day after I walked out of that venue, I didn't turn my phone off, didn't flee the state, didn't hide like some broken-hearted coward who just had his life stolen. No, I got up early, took a long shower, shaved, brewed a cup of coffee, and watched the sunrise from my porch. Because I wasn't just walking away from Amber, I was closing a chapter that I had already rewritten behind the scenes. The plan wasn't born out of spite. It was born out of clarity, the kind that only comes when someone disrespects you with such boldness that your pride finally kicks the door open and demands justice. Before the wedding, when I'd moved out for that weekend getaway, I did more than talk to Kenny. I went to a title attorney who specializes in trusts and property protection, and I transferred my portion of the house, my legal right as co-owner, into a living trust under my brother Danny's name. Now Danny is no saint. He once tried to sell my baseball cards in junior high, but he's blood, and he owes me for not ratting him out back then. The trust was airtight, legally binding. And it meant that Amber couldn't touch my half of the house unless she got approval from Danny, which was about as likely as Claudia admitting she's wrong. Now here's the part that really sings the prenup. You see, that little document Claudia had drawn up, the one with all the fancy language and sneaky clauses, it was worthless the moment I walked out of the ceremony, because that prenup only activated after we got married. No marriage, no contract. No contract, no claim to assets. So every legal weapon they thought they had ready to go was as useless as Claudia's wine-tasting diploma hanging in her hallway. Of course, Claudia didn't go down without trying to claw her way through. She called around to every lawyer in town, tried to threaten me over the phone, even left a voicemail where she said I was emotionally unstable and needed to think about the damage I was doing to Amber's future. That one made me laugh out loud. The woman had spent the last 4 years trying to rewrite my role in Amber's life into something like a stepping stool, and now she was suddenly concerned about my emotions? Please. The thing is, I had more than just financial dirt. I had text messages, screenshots, recordings, and the worst of it, messages where Claudia and Amber mocked my dad, the man who raised me alone after my mom died when I was 11. My dad wasn't perfect. He drank a little too much after work and couldn't fix a damn thing around the house without making it worse, but he was loyal, and he loved hard, and he did everything he could to make sure I grew up right. He passed away 3 years ago. I brought his watch to the wedding, planning to wear it. Then I read that message the night before, Amber texting her mom, saying if his deadbeat dad taught him anything, it's probably how to get used to losing. That one broke something in me I didn't even know was still working. Because that wasn't about houses or money or games. That was about my father. About the man who worked through cancer until his fingers turned gray just to leave me enough for a down payment on a future. That's when the plan stopped being a defense and started being a mission. So after I walked out, I gave it 2 days. I let them spin their own narrative first. Amber posted some cryptic photo on Instagram about choosing peace over chaos, which I think was meant to make her look enlightened or whatever. Claudia went silent. Probably lawyer shopping. But I wasn't done yet. I drafted a Facebook post. Just vague enough to avoid lawsuits, just specific enough that everyone who mattered would know. It started like this: it's wild how people will fake love for a house, lie through their teeth, and think they're clever enough to get away with it. But sometimes the dumb guy they underestimated was taking notes the whole time. Be careful who you scam. Some of us come prepared. I didn't tag anyone. Didn't need to. Within 2 hours, I had over 100 comments, half of them from people I hadn't heard from since high school, all asking who it was about. A few of Claudia's friends liked it before realizing what it was. Someone even DM'd me asking if I was talking about Amber, and all I replied with was, "Wouldn't you like to know?" I knew that post would start fires, but I wasn't worried. Because at that point, I'd already sent copies of everything, the emails, the texts, the prenup, the voicemail recordings, to a flash drive I left in my safety deposit box. I gave a copy to Kenny, another to my brother. And the best part? I also left a copy in an envelope, addressed to Amber, sitting on the kitchen table next to a note that simply said, "You played the game." I just finished it better. That house, the one they thought was the prize, it's not hers anymore. It's not mine either. It's a reminder, a monument to underestimating the quiet guy who pays attention. And the best part is, I didn't even raise my voice once. And while they were scrambling to salvage what little dignity they had left, I was already working on the next move. Because this story isn't over, not even close. There's something about the smell of motor oil and burnt coffee that makes a morning feel grounded, even when the rest of your life has gone completely off the rails. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I got to the shop around 6:30, unlocked the bay doors, turned on the radio to some classic rock station that always plays the same 5 songs, and fired up the old coffee maker that spits out bitterness with a side of sludge. I was halfway through sorting invoices when the bell on the front door chimed, and I heard the unmistakable click of heels followed by the thud of something heavier. Now, I've had angry customers, surprise inspections, even a raccoon once, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what I saw when I stepped into the front of the shop. Amber was standing there, barely upright, hair tangled and pulled back like she hadn't even looked in a mirror, clothes wrinkled, and her eyes red and puffy, like she hadn't stopped crying for hours. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like I wasn't real. Then she wobbled, lost her balance, and dropped to her knees right there on the oil-stained tile. I didn't rush over. I didn't offer a hand. I just stood there, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I didn't trust anything I was seeing. For all I knew, this was another performance, another act in whatever twisted drama Claudia had written for her daughter. But then she looked up at me and said, she kicked me out. Just like that. No preamble. No dramatics. Just raw, empty words. She told me Claudia had sold her out, took over the house, moved money without telling her, and now Amber was living out of her car, the same one I helped her pick out 2 years ago. Claudia had apparently drawn up a second deed, the kind that legally tied the property back to her under a revocable ownership clause, a phrase that, I swear to God, sounds more like a mob move than something you'd hear in a family home. And this wasn't something I'd ever seen in any of the documents. It had been hidden, buried in legalese and fine print I wasn't privy to because, legally speaking, I wasn't supposed to need to know. That clause gave Claudia access to seize control if Amber failed to uphold financial obligations. Which she did, because I took my half with me. Amber was crying now, really crying. Not the cute little tearstream kind, but the kind where your face gets blotchy, your throat makes weird sounds, and snot is running but you're too far gone to care. She looked at me through all that mess and said, "Did you ever love me?" Like she just needed that one lifeline, something to anchor her in a sea of betrayal. I paused. I really did. I let the silence stretch long enough that I think she thought I wouldn't answer. But then I looked her in the eye and said, I loved who I thought you were. And that was the truth. I loved the woman who laughed at my dumb jokes, who stayed up late eating cold pizza with me on the floor, who said she wanted a life with me built on loyalty and honesty. But that woman wasn't real. She was a costume worn by someone who let her mother script the entire performance. And now, without Claudia's script, she was just standing there lost, not knowing how to play herself. She begged for another chance. Said things had gotten twisted, that she hadn't meant to hurt me, that she'd been confused and scared and pressured. Said she didn't even read most of the legal stuff, that Claudia had always handled the complicated things. Said if I gave her one more shot, she'd prove she still loved me. I didn't say anything. I just walked to the back room, opened the drawer next to the old fax machine no one used anymore, and pulled out a small, folded slip of paper. I handed it to her. No words, just a number written on it, nothing else. She took it like it was sacred, unfolded it slowly, expecting maybe an address or a check or God knows what. It was a phone number. Nothing fancy. No context. Just 10 digits in my handwriting. She looked confused, brows furrowed, lips parted like she was about to ask, but I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't fake. That number? It connects to a voicemail. Not mine. Not even a friend's. It's a number I set up months ago, tied to a secure line with a single audio file recorded on it. A recording of Claudia, caught on her own phone, which she thought was on mute, talking to her sister about the house play, how she had Amber wrapped around her finger, and how the whole point was to build equity off that idiot mechanic. Her words, not mine. Amber's heard her mom say a lot of cruel things, I'm sure. But I doubt she ever heard her say that. What she does with it now, that's on her. Maybe she listens and walks away. Maybe she crawls back to Claudia, tail between her legs. Maybe she finally cuts the cord and becomes her own person. Hell, maybe she burns the recording and pretends none of this ever happened. Me? I don't need to know. I'm not interested in vengeance anymore. I got what I needed, the truth exposed, the lies untangled, and my soul back. But still, there's a copy of that file sitting in a private folder, scheduled to email itself to every contact in Claudia's professional circle if anyone ever tries to touch me legally again. So no, I didn't burn it all down. I just lit the match and walked away. And some people? They don't even realize they're standing in gasoline until the flames are already dancing in their rearview mirror.